Hello, and welcome to episode 17 of If Supr Says It. I am, of course, Supr. It's been a while, and I am joined by DNA. How are you
How's it
doing,
going?
DNA?
Hey, great. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Sure thing. So before we begin, I actually, what title of Mirage? So obviously you work for Mirage right now. What is your title within Mirage? Are you like the team manager, the general manager? Like, what would you say is your official title with Mirage?
Basically, it's a combo position. They have me as the team manager slash, guess, head analyst.
Okay,
Um,
gotcha.
so,
So you
so
do it all. You're Mister Do It All.
yeah, try to
Okay,
be.
yeah, me too. Okay, so obviously, I know a lot of people here are probably interested in the more recent kind of things, but if you've ever watched my show or listened to the podcast, that's not exactly how we do things because we like to get some siege history and then work up to the current day. So I
Sure.
thought we would start this off with I know, your Liquipedia page almost doesn't even officially give you all the credit you've had. So I just thought I'd give you the opportunity to talk, about your days with Flipside or SK as an analyst and kind of in general, because you're my age, or maybe you're probably older than me. Obviously, you have a kid,
Yeah,
which
I'm
yeah,
definitely older.
the only guy older than me.
Yeah.
uh,
Put,
so I'm kind of curious, like what got you into Siege and into the esports aspect of it? How did you get involved with like Flipside, SK, Two Face, and then eventually which became Tempo Storm?
yeah, basically, I don't know that analysts were even a thing back then. Obviously, Hot and Cold, being family,
Mm-hmm.
was with that early Gotham Gaming roster, which ended up becoming, I believe, Flipside. And they, I was trying to find a way that I could help them compete. And I think I talked to Mint and said, hey, I think I can track some of the stuff you guys are doing and track some of the stuff the teams you're playing against are doing. And we could turn this into something that maybe could give us a slight edge. And obviously, this is all unpaid, unofficial, but he's like, yeah, anything that will give us a competitive edge, I'm for. And that basically started my, you know, journey down the rabbit hole of doing analytics.
Mm-hmm.
I've always kind of been a data guy. I've always liked looking at numbers, patterns. Um, so I worked with Flipside for a while, and then ultimately that became SK Gaming, which eventually transitioned into Dark Zero. And at that point, the Dark Zero team moved to Texas, and I believe, new ownership came in. They basically wiped out all the support staff. They brought in Christian, who was a Texas resident. He was out there, and that kind of ended my short stint with that. Um, a friend of a friend basically introduced me to Two Faced when they were looking for an analyst, and so I started working with those guys, which eventually turned into Tempo Storm when we relegated Rogue, and took that pro league spot.
So with obviously you were dealing with SK, which ended up becoming Dark Zero. Were you did they kind of clean house before the iteration of Dark Zero came in that had your son on it, or was that like during that period as well?
Is that same period? So
Okay.
I was still with SK when Nix was on that team as rookie,
Oh,
essentially as
okay.
rookie. So I was still with them, and then they ultimately ended up getting bought out by Dark Zero.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, I don't know anything. I was all behind closed door stuff outside of my pay grade,
Right. Yeah.
um, and Dark, and then they moved to Texas. So it was in one hand, like I didn't have a quote unquote job anymore,
Mm-hmm.
but my son was going to pro league and my nephew was going to pro league with with which what I thought was a great org and a great look for the game. So
Right. So on Tempo Storm, because we actually played each other at one point at the U.S. Nationals way back in 2019.
my coaching
Um,
debut.
yeah, and I was gonna say I remember you standing behind them. Even the
Yep.
I think the graphic I used for the actual announcement is you coaching at that event, if I'm not mistaken.
Right.
So were you actually like did you transition during that period from analyst to like head coach of Tempo Storm, or was that like, because I don't even remember, I'm this seems like
Yeah, it's a
forever
long
ago.
time
It's only
ago.
4
Yeah.
years ago, but were you the head coach, or were you like filling in, or like how did that situation end up?
USN, what the Tempo Storm coach was always Ken's.
Mm-hmm.
So I was the analyst in Ken's, but he was in Canada. And I don't recall if it was because it was a USN event, so he couldn't come, or if there
Mm.
was a scheduling conflict with what he had going on. So, but yeah, I was basically just the stand-in for Kins at
Okay,
USN.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
So then like after USN for 2020, basically, you spent the whole year with Tempo Storm. Was this still in like an analyst kind of role, or did you like become more involved as they were in Pro League?
It was still more of an analyst role. Basically, just I didn't have a big voice on the team. I kind of just did what they needed me to do and reported what I saw and showed them patterns and just basically what you expect from your analyst. There wasn't a whole lot of they had a general manager who was outside of I
Mm-hmm.
would say the siege scene, so he pretty much handled all of the behind closed door stuff, and then obviously you had the coach. So
So I know you mentioned earlier that you were like kind of just doing this for fun or for free, basically. Was this a point where you were getting paid, or were you still just doing it just because you like the game, you want to be involved?
Tempo Storm would probably have been the first paid position where I came on and
Okay,
actually,
yeah, that makes
actually
sense.
under contract, under a salary,
Hmm.
um, and all of that stuff. Yeah. So yeah, that was it.
So so this is like the 2020 year, and then 2021, I believe is that the first year that like the current, I guess it wouldn't be current because there's no land league anymore, but like is the NAL structure we have today, is that kind of when it's shifted to the different league style in 2021? Because that's when Mirage enters Siege, and if I'm not mistaken, I think that's like Mirage entered when the league was essentially restructured. Is that correct?
Yeah. They had the Canadian League, which I think was 4 teams, maybe more.
Mm-hmm.
And I was doing analytical stuff for Mirage, the very end of that, because they weren't with the NAL when I came on. I went to them when they were in the Canadian League. Um, and I think part of the exit of Tempo Storm leaving and some of the other teams is what ultimately transitioned them from dropping the Canadian League and just combining it to the North
Yeah,
American League. But
I
yeah,
actually do remember that now that you bring it up.
so yeah,
Um, okay, so essentially Mirage entered the NAL from the Canadian League, and Flynn, I believe, was involved on that team, and he essentially became something like the general manager or something like in charge of the team in a manner of speaking, if I'm
right.
not mistaken.
Team principal, I think, was his official title.
Yeah, and then you become involved as well, I believe, around that period with Guerra. Can you tell me
Correct.
a little bit about how that kind of what happened? Like, what was your role? One, were you still an analyst with like going into Mirage
Yeah,
at that
still,
period?
yeah, still an analyst. I don't know that they had a team manager at that point. Flynn was actually a player on the team, so I think the roster was like Flynn, Zilchi, Silent,
Mm-hmm.
Loading, and Quartz. I think it might have been.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and Flynn was still a player on the team at that point. Christian approached me initially and asked me to possibly come over and do analytics, and again,
Mm-hmm.
just strictly analytical position. I didn't give input on roster moves unless they asked me directly, like statistically, what do what how's this person doing, or what's going on with this person from a
Mm-hmm.
numbers perspective, or what do you think? But um, and I think Flynn ultimately was either it might have been Zilchi or Flynn, but one of those guys was ultimately replaced first. And then when Flynn left from being a player, he stepped into that team manager slash principal role
Mm-hmm.
for the team.
So I know you just said basically that you weren't necessarily involved in the roster decisions.
Hmm.
Um, but my question does kind of revolve around that just because of your close relations to the roster that ended up happening. So I'm curious to like kind of what role you played in that or how that transpired. So the original roster that Mirage enters NAL with is Benji, Dream, Nyx, Quartz, and I believe Loading as well. And then Houghton, um, I think he had been like released late in the off season or something, and the opportunity obviously came up for Mirage to pick him up. So the team essentially was Benji, Nyx, Houghton, Dream, and Quartz with I think Loading on the bench. Or no, it was it Quartz on
was
the
on the
bench
bench,
and
yeah.
Loading? Yeah, okay. Quartz is on the bench. And that was because now I'm remembering. Sorry, old man. Quartz was Canadian, so
Correct.
Loading. Okay, makes a lot more sense in that. So
Yeah.
Quartz is on the bench. Benji, Nyx, Houghton, Dream, and Loading. What part did you play in getting? Well, one, Nyx to the team, obviously because he's your son, and then Hot and Cold to kind of join. I think he had some other interest, obviously, at that time as well. And then if you did have any part in bringing in Benji or Dream, or Loading, who all of them honestly ended up having like or still are having pretty good careers within the
Right.
league.
As far as my role, we took a lot of different players, and I think we all worked. Me and Garrow worked pretty hard on trying to put the roster together. So that'd probably be the first time that I was ever like, I would say, involved in the roster selection. Um, so we started looking at what we needed to fill for a team and what was available, and breaking, I wouldn't say breaking down players by position, but breaking down players by kind of roles and who we need. Obviously, I had worked with Dream at Tempo. I know what type of player he is. I know what he brought to a team. So he was on our list to bring over. Nyx, back then in the single IGL system, was one of the few people at that time that was available without a buyout, because we didn't have a ton of money. That was some other things. We had some certain stipulations that we had to meet. We had to find players that we couldn't buy out, players that weren't under contract, to fill all these different boxes, and then also fill a team that we felt like could compete. Houghton kind of fell in our lap, because we didn't have him till the very end. And I want to say, because like I don't think him getting dropped I wouldn't say it wasn't planned, but nobody, it was kind of blindsided the community and because I don't even think he really knew it was happening.
Yeah, I mean, at
Whatever.
the time, that was
Yeah.
a big deal, obviously. And they ended up, for a while looking pretty foolish about it as well, to be fair.
Yeah. So they make that move, and then we have an opportunity to potentially pick him up. And he was looking, I believe it was between us and Astralis. And, he made some, he asked the org for some certain things in his contract that would allow him to potentially come to Mirage, but not necessarily tie him here. And again, all stuff between him and the org. I wasn't really in the middle of that, but ultimately decided to come over to Mirage instead of Astralis. So that's how we ended up with the roster that we had.
Yeah, and you guys actually end up up until I think the last stage of last year when Mirage made the major. I think that was their best result, was that first
Correct.
stage.
I think it was
they
third
placed
place.
third.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I remember that because we played Mirage in the last game, and we needed to win or go OT to guarantee first, and we lost, and it ended up costing us like individually like $10,000 a person by losing that match. So
Wow.
that wasn't very fun.
No.
But and I guess this kind of leads back to what you said is Houghton ends up leaving the team after this stage to join SSG, despite your guys like obviously a promising showing. Right. And I assume part of like you kind of alluded to, part of his contract with Mirage was that, and this is me guessing, like maybe after the stage, if he got an offer from another team, he could leave it. It was up to him if he wanted to leave, so he could essentially void his own contract if he wanted to.
Yeah, I don't know the exact terms, but I don't even know if it was just written for the stage with no buyout, and
yeah,
so
I mean, either way, that's certainly a very unique contract within Siege. Probably like, and we'll get to this a little bit later, but there's something that you rarely see in Siege, in my opinion, which is not as common in other esports. is like there's basically not free agency in Siege. Like, how
Yeah,
often do you ever see players? And Dream ended up leaving, so we'll talk about that a little bit later. But how often do you
yeah.
actually see players like leave one team to another in free agency and Siege? It's always just like a buyout, a trade, or somebody's dropped and then picked up by another team. Like, very rarely is like, because I think Hot and Cold was maybe even the stage 1 MVP,
He was.
uh,
Yeah.
and he's just like, oh, well, thanks for that stage. See you later, and joins another team. Like, that's just
Right.
a very rare
To be
occurrence in itself.
to be fair, I think the only time that's happened is when Nyx was traded from Dark Zero to, at the time, Rec.
Mm-hmm.
So he went to
Yeah.
Rec, and I believe it was Skies. They traded across for Skies.
Mm-hmm.
So
And I think he was obviously ended up playing there for a while. So this kind of starts what I would say for Mirage is sort of I want to say like a revolving door within the team. I feel like, and at this point, you're still serving. You don't change your role within the team, at least officially, until I think 2022, like mid through the year or something like that. Is that correct, or were you already starting to assume more of a role within the team? It's just like maybe not an official announcement.
there was a lot of stuff that I did on the back end of Mirage that a lot of people behind the scenes don't know. As far as the accommodations for the Vegas house and some certain hurdles that we had to get to make sure that we had a team house in Vegas.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there were certain things that I did outside of the analytical thing. But I wouldn't say that I didn't officially take the team manager role until Flynn ultimately stepped down. I want to say that was like June of 2022.
Mm-hmm.
I had to go. I don't know if I'm right on that timeline exactly, but I'd have to
According to
go.
Wikipedia, it's like July, so you're not far off.
Yeah, yeah,
Anyway.
yeah, somewhere in that area. So it wasn't until Flynn said that he was stepping down that my role became combined between the analyst and. But there was a lot of team manager type stuff that I was already
Mm-hmm.
doing. Flynn was more handling the stuff between Ubisoft, the connection between the communication between the team and the game, and the contract type stuff. I wasn't really handling any of that stuff.
So, like, as you kind of just mentioned, you were doing more stuff for the org within. Did you like you didn't live with the team, but you lived in the area of where they were at? Is that right?
Yeah, I'm only a couple hours south of Vegas, so I'm
So
in
were
Southern California.
you?
So
So did you have to do like because Mirage is a Canadian org, the like like I'm sure it's more difficult for them to just be in Vegas and deal with that. So were you just more hands on the ground, having to try to figure out the housing situation and make sure they're all taken care of for the org?
yeah,
Is that basically how it went?
yeah, basically it. Like they hired somebody to help them find the house, and then I dealt with that person and
Mm-hmm.
and basically finding one that fit again all of the needs that we needed, and then um, did that stuff because there was nobody here to physically do some of that stuff.
Okay. So after that first stage, which is honestly, at least in terms of placing, the high point of Mirage to this date, still the highest Mirage is placed within the league.
Right.
Stage two of that of 2021 doesn't go well. I think the team places seventh,
Right.
and that's with Court stepping in for Hot. Now, obviously, like at the time, I remember Court certainly didn't get the best reputation. I think people didn't think he performed that well, but to be fair, he was also replacing the MVP of the league, and he had never played on land because he was unable to play stage one. So he's moving into a new country from Canada. So it's like a lot of change for
Oh yeah,
Courts
absolutely.
and a lot of pressure. And while he didn't he didn't light the world on fire, he also didn't do terrible. I think he was, off the top of my head, like around -10 or something. Like, he's not the worst player in the league, basically. But the team ends up dropping him and picking up Thomas after this stage. Now I know you're not necessarily in that manager team, running the team role at that point, but what role do you have in this decision? Because to me, this is the decision that and we'll talk about some of the other stuff down the road, but this is a decision that kind of begins the I want to say musical chairs of Mirage,
Hmm.
because as far as I know, Mirage have made by far the most roster changes within the league since the 2021 season. And this is
Right.
kind of, the hot and cold thing's not really your guys' fault. You just left, joined a different team. But this is kind of what starts it off. What what went into the decision to remove Courts after one stage and bring in Thomas?
I think that there was some obviously performance issues, like you mentioned, and then there was some, I would say, team house issues too. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Maybe some personality conflicts that were going on, and obviously, I'm not a part of that because I'm not in the house on a daily. So I would hear about things secondhand, personality clashes, or certain things that maybe just weren't going. And if I recall, I want to say Courts kind of got himself replaced. I don't think
Mm-hmm.
a team. I don't think it. I think he was told not to do something, and he just went ahead and tweeted that he was benched or something along those lines. And was ultimately benched himself. So the team was
Right.
just like, all right, well, like I guess he's already gone. He'd already given up at that point. And it's been a while since we went through that. So I don't think it was quite entirely decided on which direction we were going to go, but he kind of like decided for us by some of the behavior. And that I would believe that was some of the things that people were having problems with the way he was handling certain things, and then that was just like a stamp on not handling a situation the way he should have, perhaps.
So in a situation like this, when Courts leaves and then Thomas is brought on, and at this point, I think Nix is, like you mentioned, he's like the IGL of the team. So in theory, he's the leader of the team. Are you like, so when you say like Courts is having team house issues or whatever, are you speaking to like Nix about this? As obviously he's your son, you're closer to him than anybody else, of course.
Right.
Or is it you're talking to Guerra and this is what he's seeing, or is it just like a combination? Because I'm kind of curious of the dynamic of you being a coach and then eventually running the team while Nix is essentially the leader of the team. And like, is he kind of, because in theory the hierarchy is the player goes to the coach talks to blah blah blah, right? Is this like, are you fielding just a lot of things from Nix regarding these kind of situations, or does he kind of stay out of it and let you and coach or whatever deal with that kind of thing?
Yeah, believe it or not, me and Nix didn't, even as the IGL, we didn't talk about decisions about the team. It was mainly the support staff, and
Hmm.
we would have meetings and we'd get people's feedback, during team meetings or whatnot. But for the most part, I would say Guerra was dealing with that stuff and then kind of reporting to, you know, this is what's going on. Unless it was something like, oh, this happened, or somebody was telling me about a specific event. Um, but it wasn't like meetings with Nix about what's going on, or I would constantly, and still to this day, still constantly reach out to players and staff individually and just ask them what's going on. Do you need to talk? Do you want to talk? Is there something you want to get off your chest
Right.
anonymously? I've always had that open door policy with people, so that they have an open avenue where they can share their feelings and not feel like they're being scrutinized, or that they have to jump on what everybody else is saying, because if they don't, they look like the outsider. I've always tried to give people a platform to express how they feel.
So, and this was a while ago, so if you don't really recall, it's perfectly okay. We can move on. So, you guys land on Thomas, who is more of an outspoken kind of personality. And I would consider Nix within a team like more of an outspoken personality. So what ends up happening obviously is that's not a good mix.
Nope.
But what do you remember how the team or how you guys ended up deciding to bring in Thomas for Courts?
I don't remember exactly who the other candidates were, and I'm drawing a blank at why we landed on Thomas. And just like anytime you bring any player on, there's always, here's the pros, here's the cons. So we kind of knew what the pros were going to be bringing him on, and we kind of knew what the consequences were going to be bringing him on. But I believe we felt the pros outweighed the cons at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And it also we've been Mirage has been hit with I don't think there's ever been a stage where we're not almost scrambling to make something happen, some sort of miracle to pull this roster off to so that we can compete. And I want to say that there was definitely some stuff that happened in that situation as well, where it's like down to the wire and we've got to make a choice. So we've kind of backed ourselves into we have to make this choice and we got to make it now kind of thing.
So you guys end up bringing in Thomas. It doesn't go great, 6th place, which is an improvement on the last stage, but obviously still not where it appears the org wanted to be. And then heading into 2022, Loading, who was actually named the most improved player, I think, if I remember that correctly, is removed, and Nyx is benched. And then Dream actually ends up leaving as well, which we can talk about now. Dream is essentially, like, as far as I can remember, like really the first free agent to just leave a team and just kind of, not it's just something like we talked about already. Just free agents just leaving teams just doesn't really happen that often in Siege.
Right.
So in the situation, and we'll get to Nyx and Loading, but I am curious to hear, like, from your perspective, what goes on with Dream here in this early 2022, that he just leaves the team. You guys have a good player, you don't get anything back for him, he just joins OXG, and that's the end of Dream on Mirage.
I want to say, I don't like to blame people here, and I don't know the details of what he was dealing with, but at the time, Flynn's the team manager at this point, and it basically came down to an expiration date in Dream's contract with no grace period. So his contract essentially expired with no.
So he didn't get a contract extension in time.
It didn't have an extension. He didn't have anything in place to allow Mirage time to resecure him. He became a free agent, and OXG has the best timing in the world, and they swoop in and pick up a guy that's off contract. And that's literally what it came down to.
So obviously Flynn ends up leaving the team not much later. But I remember at the time thinking that that's like, I want to say I was like, that's just a very Mirage thing based off of how the 2021 season went for Mirage.
Right.
That I think arguably the best player on the team just leaves and nothing's done about it. Nothing can be done about it. Is that, like, at this point, obviously you're still the analyst, but in reality you're probably more than just that. What's your what's your reaction to that going on? Are you just like, wait, what, Dream's not on the team now? Or did you know this was coming?
I can't say that I knew that it was coming, but obviously, again, I Dream, I love the guy. He's a great guy. So you can't, any of these players, you can't wish but nothing but the best for them if that's what they want, right? That improves their life and you're happy for him. So of course it's a double negative because you're happy that he's got an opportunity to potentially launch his career even further, but you're obviously sad because you just lost a big piece of your team. I was just kind of in shock at like how it happened and why it happened. So of course I wanted to know, like, how did this slip through the cracks? And that's ultimately what it was, just him slipping through the cracks. So
yeah, obviously not the ideal situation, and probably something that impacted Flynn.
Yeah, I mean, and if you think about it, Newers is on that team too, and that's the same time that we lose Newers. So a lot of people don't know that, but Newers was coming to Mirage, and he just wasn't under contract. And
so
I was
Newers,
pushing.
Sorry to interrupt. So was Newers replacing not Loading, or was Newers replacing Nyx?
I believe I couldn't tell you for sure who he was replacing, but Newers was coming onto the roster. He had made a verbal agreement to come to the team at this point, and nothing in writing. Again,
can I ask? That's another question I'd have. If you have this like rookie player who you guys think is really good or whatever, the team wants to pick him up, why? Because, like, obviously from a fan perspective,
I know exactly what
or
you're going to ask,
anybody's perspective, everyone's like, what is going on? Because at the same time, not only do you not lock up Newers, who obviously ends up becoming one of the better players in the league, you lose Dream, and they both go to the same team. So, like, what happens there where you don't extend your best player's contract, and then you don't sign the rookie player on your team? And when I say this, I don't mean offense to it, but it's like knowing that you're Mirage and these are the kind of players that you need to lock up, because at the end of the day, these bigger teams can come in and just offer more money if they have the chance.
Yeah, it's a conversation that I know you were going to ask this exact question. It's a conversation that I had. Verbal isn't good enough for me. Let's get it in writing. Let's get him signed to a content creator contract and transfer him to a player when the transfer window opens up, because the window wasn't open.
Mm-hmm.
There was some back and forth between, again, Flynn at the time and Ubisoft that we could not sign him because we weren't in the transfer window. And that turned into confusion on whether or not we could or couldn't. And ultimately, he ended up going to OXG. I was pushing to get him signed on some sort of content creation contract so that he was obligated with Mirage in writing, and then we would transfer him when the transfer window opened up to a player role. But was told, and I'm not the only person, there's other people that made this exact same statement, and was told we weren't allowed to do that.
So during this period of early 2022, you guys, and that's, I think, is where a lot of the credibility for Mirage maybe is even hurt. But you guys lose Dream, you lose Newers, you drop Not Loading, who was just named the most improved player in the league. What went into the decision with Not Loading of why? Because that award is a peer voted award, so the players voted Not Loading the most improved. And if I don't remember exactly, but I think he was the best performing player on the team in stage 3. So what went on there for Loading to also be benched or released at this point?
I honestly cannot recall what the reasoning behind the move on Loading was. And I want to say that it was something personal on his end. Like, I think he felt like he needed to take a step back.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it was, I don't know if the timeline is the exact next stage where we make that move on Loading, or if it's the following stage where he doesn't have the results. I can't remember exactly. It's all kind
so
of blurring
you guys,
together.
so from what I remember, because he was actually released February, he was released the same period as Nick, same time that Dream leaves. From what I remember, you guys played in the SI quals, and Loading did horrible. And the decision was made following the SI quals to release Loading. But the SI quals, of course, are like, especially if you lose early, you're only playing like 2 matches. So it's very, it's hard to. If I remember correctly, I believe that the decision was made based off of those quals, but like it was only a couple games where he had just had a whole season of improving.
Right. Yeah, and again, I can't recall the exact reasoning behind it very well could have been. But again, I'm not generally involved in those roster
So
decisions
Gira
at
is
this
the
point.
one who's making these decisions, essentially.
I think him and Flynn handled most of the roster stuff when Flynn was still there. So they would occasionally, again, ask for insight on certain things or certain opinions. But Flynn and Gara had meetings outside of what I had meetings with, and
Right.
discussed, potential roster moves and what they wanted to do and the direction they wanted to go.
So during the same period, Nyx is also benched.
Correct.
And this is where I do want to talk briefly about. So Thomas is on the team. Thomas, as I already mentioned, he's a leadership kind of figure, or he tries to be on the teams. And so does Nyx. And Nyx has kind of gained himself a reputation as being, I would say, a bit of a difficult teammate. I think that's fair to say. From multiple teams have said they didn't love teaming with Nyx, in terms of like his leadership style, whatever it may be. As Knicks's father, like in this situation, how does this go about, benching your own son basically? Like, is this like, do you treat this as like when Knicks is benched here? And I think a lot of it is because of the personality conflicts that end up happening. Like the team doesn't like him essentially.
Right.
What like, how does the conversation go? What is it like for you in this situation, obviously as his dad, for him to be benched on the team that you're um working for in a capacity?
The Knicks decision was never even given to me, was never even brought to my attention. It was made, and I was told after it was made. So, like, I wasn't even involved in that conversation. And that
Did
was
you
between,
feel like, so when that happens, like, so let me like, with the loading decision, are you involved in that a little bit?
I do recall like having discussions about stuff like that. And I remember kind of being upset that other ones that I was talked to about, but that one I was not. And I understand why I wasn't. That's
Right.
a stigma. That's a stigma that I've gotten my career. It's a stigma that Nick's has gotten his career, that it's impossible to have a professional relationship with a father and son. So
Mm-hmm.
I get people's lackluster, um, and I get people don't believe when I tell them that is in fact false. I'm probably
Yeah, and
Nick's
we'll
hardest
talk
critic.
about, yeah, I mean, and
Yeah,
we'll talk about what ends up going on with Knicks on the team
right.
in a little bit as well. At the time, did you feel like that was the right decision to make, or were you like a little confused of why they make that decision? Because right now, and the team ends up picking up Marmalade, Melted, and Razor for Nick's Loading and Dream, which obviously ends up being a pretty big downgrade,
Yeah.
just overall. Were you on board with like all of these changes, or were you like, what's going on here?
No, I wasn't on board, and I thought with losing Dream that we needed to secure Knicks because we had absolutely no voice on the team at that
Mm-hmm.
point. We had lost, Dream was a big part of our attack. He's a good shot caller. He's good at orchestrating what he needs done to get the plant down. And Knicks was good at IGLA microing situations where he could, get his voice and what he needed accomplished to get whatever control we needed during a match.
So you
Um,
didn't feel like Thomas could fill that capacity, even though in
I
theory
did not.
that's Thomas's role on the team.
I did not feel that. I felt that we were losing, with losing Dream. I felt like that was the wrong direction to go. We were going to lose all traditional, orchestrating ability. It
Hmm.
was just going to basically be a yelling match at like, chaos almost is what I felt like it was going to turn into.
So
As
the
far as
team.
far as a round by round goes, like during the round.
So in regards to Marm, Melted, and Razor, did you have input on picking them up, or is there somebody you want? I mean, we've already talked about Newers, obviously, but was there people that you wanted instead, and you were kind of overruled, or is this just what you thought would be the best for the team?
Um, I'm sure that there was players that we looked at, and I don't recall anybody that stood out at that particular point that I wanted that we didn't get. We were a little bit on the fence about Razor with some of the stuff. We weren't sure, how he was going to perform, and I believe he came with a buyout, which um, I don't recall for 100%. Again, that's right about the time I started taking over.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I wasn't quite the team manager at this point. So
So then the team ends up getting last place, I
yeah,
believe, 10th place in the league, and around June. So this is during that period, or maybe immediately after, Flynn leaves the team. Um, and then Thomas is also released from the team. I assume during this period is where you kind of stepped into essentially the role you are now, which is now you're, in a manner of speaking, in charge of the team.
correct. Yeah.
So the first move maybe that you make, I guess, would be Thomas is dropped from the team and Nix is brought back onto the team. Um, was that just based off of what you just said, as you thought Thomas was not an actual voice for the team and Nix could be?
I believe that was probably the first roster move that I would have been officially a part of. And again,
Mhm.
that's exactly what it came down to. It came down to going back and looking at round by round and not having, you can't win an attack when everybody just flood.
Right.
Last 15 seconds of the round, like we didn't, just go, just go. Everybody, just group up. Like you can't win attacks that way. And that seemed to be a lot of what was happening. We lost a lot of direction. We lost a lot of voice. I didn't say we need to pick this person up. I remember having a conversation with Gara about it. I typed out a long message. I probably still have the message of what I felt we were lacking and what we needed, and even said that he may not be the answer as a player, but this is the direction we should go, and we should find somebody that fits this. And Gara's response was, "It makes complete sense, and I agree." So
So you kind of introduced the idea, although Gira may be thinking the same thing, of replacing Thomas and bringing back Nix, or
bringing
at
back some
least
sort of
an
voice.
IGL
Yeah,
figure.
yeah.
And
And
Nix
it
is
might have,
the. I mean, Nix is still on the team. He's just on the
and that
bench.
might have
So
been why it was. It wasn't it was a lateral move versus a roster move.
and then during this period as well, you guys release Razor and bring in Kento. What
Correct.
one about the decision with Razor? Because I know personally, I had heard a lot of rumors that Razor was um, lazy as a player. I remember Marm told me a story that it was like 2 p.m. and they were trying to scrim and he was like still sleeping and they went to go wake him up and he got mad that they were like waking him up at 2 p.m. Is that
Yeah,
kind of
I'm
what
not one
happened
to
there?
yeah, I'm not one to slam people, but we're professionals and we're expected to be professionals.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't show up to practice late when you live in the team house.
It's hard.
I
It's
mean,
hard to
like
do. Although I will say,
so
I would put some of that responsibility on the coach to keep people on
uh,
a.
and that gets into the reasons of why I pushed to potentially remove the coach from
Mhm.
the team because of certain things that I feel exactly right. He's in the house. That there's a certain authoritarian figure that he needs to play in that role. So
So you make these changes, you play stage two, and you guys get 10th place again. So the changes don't work out. It's the same placing as the team.
right.
Um, and then you end up benching Nyx again. Um, and then Marmalade is also released from the team. And I think this is also where you end up letting Gira go.
Not quite.
Like it's after stage three, I
It's after
guess it'd
it's
be.
after the next stage. Yeah.
So
Um, I believe we had melted at this point. Yes.
you did have Melted, yeah. You had Melted, Kento. And if I recall, even Kento was benched at one point, and then he was like unbenched. Like I remember, so this is where I don't know to what extent you're involved in this, but I remember this being a complete shit show with
Oh
Mirage,
yeah, it was.
where Marm was benched and then not benched, Kento was benched and not benched, or Melted was benched and like Kento refused to play without like Melted, something like that. And then Marm was told that she's not going anywhere and she's like gone the next day. Like what happens here? Because this is where like obviously we've been through some musical chairs within the team here, but I feel like this is where um shit really hits the fan. And obviously at this point you're also in charge of the team, so during this period, like what's going on, what actually happens here? Because from what I had heard, Marm was like misled that she was on the team and then she gets released, Nyx is gone, Kento's benched but then he's brought back. Like what goes on in this period?
I want to first before I want to check my headset because I want to make sure my AirPods don't die here in the middle of
Yeah,
this because
sure.
I know we're gonna get I know it's gonna get spicy and I don't want people to think I'm trying to
Okay.
dodge anything. Um, I want to say that I feel like in a lot of the stuff that's happened, Marmalade, which I love Emma, she's a great person. She got screwed in this deal, and I I did fight tooth and nail, and I'm the one that told her she wasn't going anywhere because at that point I honestly felt in my position that I would have the authority and the power to do that and keep her where I thought she belonged. We had an issue on the team with I'm not going to call out any players. We had an issue on the team where we had a player that was butting heads with Knicks. So it's not Knicks, which again goes back into that. Knicks is sometimes a difficult person to team with. This person didn't handle things in the way they should have, and made some very bad comments about certain people, certain things that should not and couldn't and just shouldn't be tolerated at all at any level.
Essentially saying something that you get dropped over.
Absolutely.
Right.
And so my initial response is this person needs to be replaced. This person essentially said that the reason that Kento was benched is because he said, well, if you do that, I'm not playing.
Okay.
So we have a player that's essentially holding another player's spot hostage because he refuses to play if we make this decision. I went all the way up the ladder as far as I could because at that point, I'm as a team manager, that's fine. We'll replace you both then. And so the roster should have remained with Nix and Marm on the roster. I lost that fight.
So my question here is, if you're essentially the manager of the team, or like, see that the titles to me are a little confusing because, like, for instance, my position is I'm the general manager, right? So like, if I want to bench a player on the Siege team, they're just benched. Like, nobody's gonna tell me, unless Darren, who's the CEO, just all of a sudden says, no, you can't do that. Nobody else is gonna stop me from doing it, right? So, like, in this situation where you're saying X player said something very inappropriate, you want them gone, and then another player is saying, if this player is gone, I'm gone too. What, like, in my opinion, I'm saying, okay, see you later. Like, we don't want you on the team anyway with that kind of attitude.
That's exactly the attitude I had.
So what happens here that, if you're in charge of the team, how do you not have the authority here to like make these decisions? Is it like do they go over your head or above your head, or is Guerra doing this? Like, what happens here?
This was Guerra fighting for those guys' jobs. So Guerra went to the org and said, this is wrong. We should give everybody equal chance. He pushed really hard to against the decision when the decision should have been cut and dry. And I was told it was going to go a certain way, and that's kind of why I reinforced that to Marmalade, that she wasn't going anywhere, because that's what I was told until I wasn't told that anymore. And the decision, I believe we even tried Dexter at the time, and it was Marmalade, Dexter, Slothy, Nix, and I'm drawing a blank on the last player for some reason. But yeah, absolutely. Like an argument that I had, I'm the team manager. I'm not making a decision that I think is bad for the team because of what's happened, what I've witnessed. This is what we need to do. And I lost that fight. I did. And it's crappy because some people that I don't think deserve it ended up getting hurt in that.
So I'm curious, because the other question I would have here, so if one of the players said something very inappropriate to get benched or dropped or whatever, I assume the org is told what this player said. Does the org they're just like, whatever? Like, does Guerra not care about the, like?
I wouldn't say it was like, we don't care. I think it was more of like, well, maybe they were just upset, or maybe they just said something out of anger, or maybe, because we had a huge, I ended up going out to Vegas over this whole deal because, I packed up my car and I took off and I went to Vegas, and we had, a huge team meeting, and this person expressed uh, very apologetic feelings and that they wanted to change, and they were wrong, and they admitted what they did. But at that point, I had felt like the damage was already done. And then
Mm-hmm.
when you have another player that's essentially holding up a spot because, you know, they don't agree with the decision the upper management is making, I just didn't think that that was a good path to start down.
Right.
So I felt like at that point we have, you know, it sucks, it happened, but it happened, and we need to move forward. But
So
I
then what
feel
ends
like,
up happening is Marm gets fucked. She's told she's on the team, and then she's gone.
yep, and Knicks.
And then Nyx is gone as well. Was this a decision by, because obviously at this point you're running the team, even if they're kind of like overriding your decisions a little bit. Are you involved in Nyx being released, or do they just say Nyx is gone and you can't do anything about it?
Um, no, I think I was involved in that decision, and I think with what we had to deal with, I think that was just the decision that we needed to make. Like it wasn't a matter of like I think it was just a matter of like him and this person are not going to play together. It's not going to be good. So it was the
So was
so
this per
by ultimately deciding to go in this direction, we didn't really have a choice because it was never going to work.
so one of the players who was potentially not going to be on the team didn't want to play with Nyx. Marm would have played with Nyx, but when that decision's reversed, Nyx has to go because
It's just not going to
they
work.
can't be on the team together.
Yeah, it's just not going to work.
So for you, is this like an awkward situation because you and Guerra both agree that Nyx should come back, where he's benched, and then you bring him back to the team, and now one stage later, you're benching him again. I don't think you guys have even. Yeah, this is before stage 3 even
Yeah,
starts, I believe.
I don't necessarily think it's an awkward decision because Knicks was having some problems at this point. Like they were visible with the team. So like I'm not saying that this player or this other person is coming off half cocked and everybody's free and clear of blame. Like
Mm-hmm.
there's blame on both sides. So there was issues there that needed to be addressed. Absolutely. So
So Marm and Nyx go, and through all of this like turmoil, you guys get Dexter and Mohes,
mhm.
and it actually ends out working in your favor. Where I think you guys, this is the only major that Mirage have ever made, I believe, was this stage, despite all of this,
With the
seemingly.
exception of the first
Yeah, I guess
roster.
the first
Yeah.
stage, but there was no major because it was
There was
like
because of
COVID
COVID, yeah.
time. Yeah. So you guys get fourth. You make the major. Now the team was 4-5, so made the major with a under 500 record, but you still made the major. Um, and that's with a roster of Dexter, Benji, Mohes, Kento, and Melted.
Right.
And then following this major, well, actually, let's just talk about that stage. When the team is having success, obviously, like that's good for you. But are you like in your mind, or is it like these guys just like completely just fucked you over with what you were trying to do, and like are you already planning the next course of action here, or are you just like clean slate? Let's see what happens.
No, the next course of action was essentially, um, for me was to replace the coach at this point. This is where, and I had made decisions
What?
earlier to
What? Sorry, was Gira the coach of this stage? He
correct.
was. Okay.
Yeah.
So
So this
they
is the
had this good stage, yeah.
yeah, this is the transition of, I think that the team had to move as well. We had to go to a different team house. Um, if I recall. So yeah, they were in a new team house.
Why
Um,
did they have to go to a different team? Just the lease ran out.
I think the lease was up, and then this was the when we knew that the season was going to go back to being online.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't want to enter into another year lease, knowing that we were going to have to give the house up to go back online. This is right when the league was transitioning from going from being a land league to going back online.
Right.
So we knew going in that we needed basically to keep a house for one stage and then essentially give that up.
So during this stage, regardless of the result, you've already decided that Guerra needs to go essentially for uh basically how he just has mishandled the team up until this point.
I just, like I said, I felt there's some authoritarian duties that he wasn't capable of doing as a coach, which ultimately led to smaller problems turning into larger problems because they weren't handled when they were smaller problems. And I don't know if that makes sense, but
Right. So you guys make the major. You don't do that great at the major, but you still make it. And then Guerra is gone. Um Now around this point as well is when like rumors or complaints start coming out basically around December that Mirage owes a good amount of players or staff, what yourself included maybe, money. Now, obviously, you're not the owner of Mirage. You're not paying people.
right.
You're in the same boat as everyone else. Like, what goes on in this situation where essentially a lot of the players are saying they're not getting paid? Maybe you're not getting paid. Like, how do you deal with this situation?
Um, Personally, it came down to like telling the players like, and again, we were all in this in the situation. It wasn't any one person that wasn't dealing with this.
So you're
Um,
also in the situation where you're not getting paid as well.
where I'm owed money, correct? Yeah.
Okay.
Uh, um, and there was some things I'm sure that with COVID, with business, some things outside of my pay scale as far as organizational stuff that I have nothing to do with.
Mm-hmm.
Um, bad, call it bad luck, call it things that deals that didn't work out that should have, whatever I mean. But it got to a position where Mirage was potentially having financial issues and being delayed. I wouldn't say they're not paying, but they're definitely being delayed on paying at this point. Up until this point, we never had an issue getting paid. Um, it might be a couple days later than what we expected, but for the most part, everybody was paid when they were supposed to. And then until it just kind of that stopped happening, and we started having delays and hiccups, and time turned into longer time. And at this time, I'm still trying to run a team with people that are obviously frustrated
Hmm.
and still trying to keep people focused on what we can control and fixing and not worrying about what we can't control. And at the same time, having meetings, to try to find solutions to make sure that, we could correct this.
How do you deal with a roster where people are saying they're not getting paid? Like, from my point of view, like it's demotivating, right? Where you're
Absolutely.
you're you're missing payment, you're owed thousands. Like for instance, I know to this day even like Marm is still owed money from Mirage, right? And this is we're like the period we're talking about right now is mid 2022. Like you're in the same boat in a manner of speaking where you're owed money by Mirage, but you still work for Mirage. So like obviously I think everybody here understands that you're not just going to sit here and like shit on Mirage. Like that wouldn't be smart. But like from a person whose position is you are running a team and they've gained and the team is gaining a reputation within the game or within the league of if you join Mirage, you have to cross your fingers that you're getting paid. Like, how do you deal with that as somebody trying to put together a good like a team? Because what ends up happening here is so coming into December, Kento is benched and Hyper ends up playing the qualifiers for Mirage.
Right.
And then you bring in Drip to replace Gira, and we can talk about Drip in a moment. But the reason I
Right.
mention that is Hyper refused to sign anything with Mirage. Basically, he was willing to play the qualifier, but he did not want to. From what I understand, at least, like the rumors of not being paid and stuff actually end up in this situation preventing a player who obviously is a good player from even joining the team. Like how what is this period like for you?
I mean, to answer your first question, it's tough to build a roster when you have that stigma, over the organization. And I'm not going to sit here and make excuses for Mirage and say that everything they did was perfect and they handled everything the way they should have, because we all know that it's pretty obvious that things haven't been ideal. The one thing that I can say, and the reason that I continue to work and with this situation, is I do believe in that they are trying to correct it. I really do think that. Like, we've had another organization that has similar accusations that have recently came to surface about
Mm-hmm.
same situation, and what did they do? They just left.
So you bring that up, but I do have a question there. So
Sure.
Mirage issues like an apology
Right.
saying going into this next year, and we can go back to Yardy in a second, but just because
Sure.
I think this kind of ties in. So you say Mirage is like trying to make do or make good on this, which maybe they are.
Yeah.
The problem I have with that is like, so Mirage issued this big payment. They say they guarantee all these people are going to be paid back, whatever, 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 right? And that was, I think, in December or January, and we're in August, and these same people that were owed money then are owed money now, and the players on the current team are now owed some money. So not only did not only was that promise essentially not true because they have not paid back all those people, but the issue is now carrying over to a new year where the team is once again like owed money by the org.
Right.
So I guess my question for you, and I do want to say this for anybody listening, anybody watching, this isn't your fault. You're not the person paying these people.
Right.
You're trying to you want it's your job to make the team, to build a team, try to win things, and you're doing all of this while this other situation with the money is going on for the players and for yourself. It's like, when you tell me that the org is trying to make right by this, do you look at like the things that I just said and say, well, how? Because then we have this happening again, or these people are not owed. And to me, it comes down to a matter of question of like, if this is such a reoccurring issue for Mirage, is this just too much for Mirage? Like, I think that's a fair question to ask, right?
Yeah.
Like, if this can't be squared away, I made a joke once that it's like a Ponzi scheme where they just keep, they're
Right.
paying these people and then more people are owed, and then they pay people and more people are owed. Like, do you see the end in sight for people getting paid, or do you think, like, is there a possibility it just comes to a point where Mirage just says this is not working out, we're not going to be able to like get even with all these people that keeps piling up?
Um, I don't think that is what's gonna happen. I do think Mirage is trying to right the ship, and I just don't think it's happening as fast as anybody in the organization wishes it could, or obviously any of the people that are involved. We all would like it to be handled much quicker. That, again, I don't know the back behind closed doors dealings as far as the financing goes for Mirage's deals with sponsorships and all that stuff. That's not. I'm told things are transitioning. Certain
Mm-hmm.
things I can be told. Obviously, stuff that I can't mention, that under
Right.
NDAs. Um, but I know that I've been paid partial of what I've been owed after the fact. I know there's other players that haven't. I know that there are players that have been, and I do know there's players that are owed money that shouldn't be owed money, and been owed money for a while. So I get I get everybody's frustration as the team manager, and what I'm trying to do is protect those assets for those people, because I'm not saying that Mirage is going to do that, but you could ultimately have an organization that just says, you know what, I'm done, I'm pulling out, I'm out of here, I can't pay it, and then nobody's getting nothing, and we lose another spot in pro league. Potentially hopefully a team comes in and takes it, but we don't know if that's what's going to happen. Did I lose? I might have
Nope.
lost. Yeah, let me switch headsets real quick.
Sure. For those of you listening, DNA just is switching headsets. If you're not watching.
Let me see. Do I got you?
Yep. Can you hear me?
Hang on one sec. Are you there?
Yep. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yeah, gotcha. Sorry about that.
Sure. No problem.
So I'm trying to make sure that I take care of my job as the team manager has always been to take care of the players, to take care
Right.
of the staff. And all of the stuff that I've done, I've tried to do with keeping that interest in, keeping their interests as number one. Obviously, when you're the team manager, you have to play kind of both sides. You have your organizational as well as you're part of the team. I used to get frustrated when Mirage would post something on social media for like their Smash team, for example, and people would just bash the tweet because of what's going on with the organization. But I looked at it from a different point of view. That player that did something in Smash is getting what they had done completely diluted and trashed on, which has nothing to do with what's going on with the organization and is ultimately hurting that player, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's not his fault that Mirage owes the Siege money, the Siege community or the Siege team money, but his accomplishment went completely under the radar because people are upset. And at the end of the day, they've got to make money to pay money, right? So it's like, how do we
my question to you would be, so if you have a team that you owe, I don't want to guess how much money, but I assume there's a lot of money owed to a lot of people. Why is Mirage in other games? If they can't even afford this team, how can they afford other players or other teams? Like, in my opinion, the way it should work is if you owe people money, you pay back the money you owe. And you don't keep adding money to owe until you pay back the people that are owed money. Like, the way that I see it is we owe these people money. We're just going to tell you that we'll pay them back. And then we'll pay them back a little bit so they're like happy for now. And then we'll just keep piling this up. And we'll just, now we owe some more players money. Now we owe some more players money. Like, and again, this isn't you doing this, of course. But the problem that I have is if you owe people money and you're not paying them back, why do you keep, like, what are you adding for? You can't even afford the thing you already have. You get what I'm saying?
Right. Yeah, I understand. And I don't even know if the Smash guys are even paid. Like, I don't know if they're just on the organization. I don't, like, again, that's other stuff that is outside of the Siege stuff that I handle. So, but I understand your question. It's a completely valid question. But I don't have an answer for that as far as like that. I mean, that's a question for Mirage.
Okay. So we can kind of get back into the team itself now. So in December, you let Gira go and you bring in Yardi. Now obviously Yardi, and we'll talk from like at that point in time, not necessarily right now because we'll get into that, but at that point in time, Yardi has obviously quite the reputation, as a player or a personality or whatever. What makes you what goes into this decision to let go of Gira? Like, we've already talked about why you decided to let go of Gira, but
Right.
in his defense, I wasn't a huge fan of Gira either, I will admit 100%. In his defense, they did just make a major, right? So you let go of Gira following the major and you bring in Yardi, who also ends up replacing Kento for Hyper, at least temporarily with Hyper. What goes into the decision there to bring in Yardi?
That was the team. That was the team at the major deciding that. I remember getting a call from Dexter saying we want to get rid of the coach. And again, this is already something that is in the back
You
of my
wanted
head.
to do anyway, right?
And and we want to bring Yardi on, is what he told me. And I believe they also talked at that point about removing Kento from the team because I don't think he played particularly well at the major.
Right.
Um, so I remember having a few meetings with the team, and I was absolutely against the idea of bringing Yardy on as a coach. Um, and I had meetings with Carl about it, and I had discussions with
Carl's the owner of
the owner
Mirage.
of Mirage. Yeah. Um, just discussions with some of the other support staff, Justin, and deciding on the team really pushing hard that this was going to fix their problems.
Mhm.
So of course I'm going to listen to the players and see what they have to say. I'm open minded, but I wasn't a fan of the idea at the very beginning. I literally remember saying, absolutely not. I think that's a horrible idea. I met with Yardy, Adam, and I will be honest with you, he surprised me. And I actually liked, when I first met with him, what he had to say. I liked his idea for the vision. I liked what he was bringing to the table.
Mhm.
And again, when you talk about the hurdles of how do you build a team when you're having financial issues, you start getting into a position where sometimes you have to grab what you can grab. And I talked to Carl, and I remember telling him, if we go in one direction and it's not the direction the team thinks is the right direction, the excuses are going to be, well, we wanted this person as the coach and DNA didn't want this person. This is why we failed. So at this
Mhm.
point, with having a conversation with Yardy, actually believing some of the problems that Guerra had, Yardy could fix. Yardy's a stronger personality. He's a
Right.
little more dominant in certain things.
He actually
Um,
technically has a degree
yeah,
in coaching.
being an ex-player, I thought that maybe this will work. This is the players they want. This is who the players think that would be suited for them to be a coach. Maybe he'll have the respect of the players, and this could be a good thing. And after
Mhm.
meeting with him and hearing what he had to say and what his vision was and what his plan was, I mean, I think I even talked to his dad, which is a great guy too. Um,
Mhm.
I told Carl, we can either go in the direction complete opposite of the team, or again limited on time, we can go in the direction that the team thinks is the best decision, that they all were standing in on. I don't think there was a single player that said that this is not what they wanted and why they wanted
Right.
it.
Okay.
And that's ultimately what led to the decision of, okay, let's give him an opportunity, let's give him a chance. And
Okay.
so
So
we brought him
then,
as the coach.
so interestingly enough, this brings in another, I think, shit show. Is how I would put it. So Hyper plays the qualifiers with you guys for Kento. You guys, I think you do okay, but not great. You lose, obviously.
Right.
And then the entire team that just made the major is dropped, including Benji. And at the time, this was confusing to me because so Mirage, through everybody, always kept Benji around. And Benji finally had, I think he was a top 10 rated player, stage 3 of last year. You guys made the major. You brought in Dexter, made the major first stage, brought in Mohes, made the major first stage. And all of a sudden, you guys let all of them go. They're all gone. You squad wipe the team,
Yep.
including Benji, who you guys have been so patient with as a player, finally seemingly reaching whatever potential he has. What goes on here? Like, because to me, this is a strange decision, obviously, given that you're coming off making a major. The team is seemingly, it's a young team with good trajectory in theory. What happens here? Why you decide to let the entire team go?
Um, I believe that this just turned into pissed off players about payments, partly pissed
Mm-hmm.
off personalities within the team about which direction we should go. I wasn't really happy with the way that Kinto was dropped with Dexter. Essentially, him calling me saying we want to remove away from Kento, and I remember telling him, okay, that's fine, we can have this discussion. To me getting a message from Kento saying, how am I getting home? And I'm going, what? Like, oh yeah, I was just told I was dropped. Who told you that? Like,
Mm-hmm.
stuff that's just outside of what players should be doing as a team. And at this point, I felt like there was no controlling the team. There was too many ideas, too many people that thought things should go one way or another.
So is
And
this not like at this point though? So you bring in Yardy as the coach,
right,
seemingly because he's a stronger personality. He can in theory control the team more. These are the guys that literally asked for Yardy to be the coach,
right.
and all of a sudden there's no control of the team. People are just telling people they're dropped without even discussing it with you, who is in charge of the team.
That would have probably been right before Yardy got there. So let me back it up a little bit.
Okay.
So the Kento Dexter thing was still probably under Guerra, and when Yardy came to the team, we started trialing players to fill certain roles and started finding different pieces of different puzzles. Yardy had a pretty good system on how he would evaluate players, and he was essentially, you saw the image where Yardy's just knocking people off. He
Right.
was
Yeah.
just he was making choices and decisions based on what the team needed, and I don't necessarily think. I'm trying to remember if that's when, and everybody just kind of got picked off at that point. So I think Dexter, me and Yardy had a conversation about Dexter early on that he was going to be replaced because of personality issues.
Well,
Because
the
of
time. So just to refresh your memory, because the timeline I'm looking at, Yardy is announced as the coach in December.
right,
Hyper replaces Kento at that point. So Kento may have been told before Yardy that they needed a new player, whatever.
yeah,
So they play the qualifier with Hyper and leave. And then in February, so it's been roughly 2 months, 3 months with Yardy as the coach. The rest of the team is released.
that's after the
So
stage though. Yes.
no, it's before the stage starts because you guys played the SI quals, lost, and then you dropped your team before the first stage of this year, before SI.
Okay.
So I guess my question is so Yardy is brought in to try to control the team, and these are literally the players that requested that he be the coach, and he drops all of them, or like you guys decide the team's not like you can't control it, because I remember this was a big issue for the players, is them saying he wouldn't even be the coach of the team if it wasn't for them, and then he just
Yeah.
drops all of them.
Yeah.
So what for you, like what goes in here to make this move based off of, obviously you guys didn't make SI, but you were on somewhat of a positive trajectory. What goes into this move? Like what's the thinking here?
This is when the team started basically transitioning into more of like what, at this point, what the team felt was the best fit for what they needed. And that's when I think players just started getting replaced. Like I think we even played Ben at Hard Breach at one point, and I think Yardy brings Surf in, right?
Well, so that's my question. So you say this is the bet, like what the team thinks they needed, but Yardy replaces the team.
Yeah. Well, he
So
replaces
like
them one by one. It wasn't. I don't think we wiped the whole squad at that point. I
I
think
think
we
so. If
replaced
I
it
remember correctly,
melted and
Melted
Kento
and Deck, yeah, Melted,
melted
I
and
think, and
Kento was
Dexter were
gone.
gone.
Dexter
Yeah.
was still there. Mo was still there, I believe,
Hmm.
and Ben was still there. And then those guys slowly got picked off one by one. Dexter was the first to
And is
go.
this because was this Yardy saying that they're not fitting into what they're trying to do?
Correct. This is not just Yardy, but the players agreeing that we should go in this direction with this player. So
Hmm.
I believe Dexter was the first one, and then Mo Hesse, and then I think Ben was the last one because I remember trying Ben on Hard Breach, which he played really well. Ben is a
Hmm.
phenomenal player, and then the team just decided, no, we think this is a better fit. Not going with Ben.
So then you guys bring in Kansan, Rampy, Surf, Yeti, and DP, and
Yep.
Slothy on the bench. Obviously, on paper, that's a
Right.
talented team. And obviously, we know it doesn't go that well. what goes on here with this like version of the team, because obviously it doesn't make you guys look great that you drop your whole team, a team that was performing decently well, and then bring in all these like name players essentially, and part of my French, but kind of shit their pants. Like the team did not play that well.
Right.
Um, what's going on like in your mind here at this point? What are you thinking?
Um, as far as like what went wrong with the team,
Yeah, like, are you having discussions with Yardy during this period of like what's going on? Why are we so bad? Like that kind of thing. Like even
yeah, I
like
mean,
for
yeah,
instance, Surf is on Breach on this team. Like it's a weird mix of players, obviously.
right. I think on paper, I think it looked better than it did, and when it actually got into practice, it just didn't work. The roles weren't right. Um, we struggled on attack with again not having a. I mean, Yeti is a strong voice. Don't get me wrong. Yeti's
Mm-hmm.
is a good player, but again, it was more back to that chaotic kind of flood type attack, which just doesn't work in my opinion. And just things just weren't clicking, and I just don't think we had the right personnel in the right positions. And on paper, it looked like we did, but ultimately, obviously, we didn't. We didn't play well at all. Um, we had some highlights, but a lot of low lights.
So with this team, obviously it doesn't end up working out. Yeti decides to just completely leave the game, and then Surf decides to leave the team. DP goes to sub. Are these decisions impacted by the Mirage payment situation? Like, because for
Yeah,
instance, Surf just
even
leaving.
yeah, even some of the stuff during the stage, impacted some of the Mirage payment issues. Like I don't know that Yeti retires if necessarily payments were on time. I can't say for sure. I can't speak for him, but
Yeah.
obviously all of this stuff is weighing on all the players.
So it's another situation where the team is impacted by Mirage being unable to pay them. But in this situation, it's kind of like I feel like this is extremely damaging reputation wise, just because Mirage issued like the big apology to everything,
Right.
and then they lose Surf. Yeti basically forced Yeti into retirement. I think DP essentially the same thing because they're not getting paid again, or they're late getting paid.
DP was kind of cut again, and that was a Yardy thing where he just like cut a player and never even had a conversation with me about it. Matt didn't even know if he was on the team anymore. He just said he was removed from everything. I found out about that secondhand. That's what
So
started
Yardi benched a player without speaking to you about it.
it. Basically, just like we're gonna make this decision, and
Hmm.
had Justin remove his access to everything, and then Matt's like, "Am I like off the team?" So I had a conversation with Matt, and I told him he was not cut from the team. That wasn't going to happen. That he was currently benched. We're looking at potential other options, but this is where this kind of started Yardy's spiral to where he ends up where he's at now, I guess.
So since we kind of transitioned to that subject, so you say Yardi spirals into his position now, which is he was essentially let go as the coach and then decided to retire.
Right.
What would you like? What do you mean by like he spirals into it? So what goes on during this period after the poor stage one?
Um, just decisions that probably should have been ran up the ladder before certain decisions were made, and maybe taking a little too much player input into consideration, I guess. From his point of view, like there's a lot of rumors on things that were said or things that were done or things, but you know ultimately, like that's just not the way a player should be removed from a team. um and again, I talk to all the players individually, and I get feedback from them where they
Hmm.
can remain anonymous. And I'm not going to mention names, but
Yeah, of course you don't need to.
but things came up about the way that coach was handling certain situations that they didn't agree with it. And it wasn't like this person was in a meeting and they were all calling this guy out. These are individual conversations had separately with the same conversation, if that makes sense. I had made the decision early on that we were going to probably need to find a different coach long before. I know there's rumors that Yardy, supposedly all the players went behind Yardy's back to get him cut. It has nothing to do with that. When
Right.
I was finally approached by that, uh, it was already a decision that I had started down that ladder. Like
So
I
the
can go,
players did come to you to replace Yardy, but you
not
already
necessarily
were.
replace him, but come to me with
They had
issues that they
issues
had.
with how he was handling things.
And that at that point I was like, well, my plan is to replace him as coach. And
And they didn't stop
and
you,
they
essentially.
didn't say like, oh no, that's a bad idea. They, but it wasn't like they said, hey, Yardy's the problem, he needs to go. Like nobody did that. I had individual players tell me about issues that were handled, things they didn't agree with, decisions they didn't agree with. And at that point is when I said, well, my plan is this. And
So,
go ahead.
so just kind of back to like, so Yardy, and you can go into more detail or not, up to you. So Yardy was essentially during this period where they had the bad stage. He was, in a manner of speaking, I'll say like playing musical chairs with the team,
Right.
and like just doing things without speaking to you about it, or making decisions without speaking to you or Carl or anybody like that. And it was causing issues within the team because he was, I don't want to say going like power hungry, but he was like
You know,
trying to like he was doing a lot of things without really talking about what was going on.
I don't know that he wasn't necessarily. I know he was having meetings with Carl, between him and Carl. Which this is an internal Mirage issue that I've tried to address. Over my course of being here, like the team manager needs to run the team,
Right.
and there needs to be a chain of command. And when stuff like this happens, is when you create issues because people just go around you because.
I mean, I will 100% say just if this is what was occurring from my position as GM, if my coach is just like doing all this crazy shit and I don't know any of it until a player comes to me and says blah blah blah, if I'm finding out about it besides straight from the coach before it even happened, it's an issue.
Right.
It's like I should know, because at the end of the day, you hire the coach and you hire the players,
Right.
and there's a chain of command. You, coach, players. If the coach is just ignoring the chain of command, obviously it creates issues. Is that essentially what was going on?
I don't think Yardy did anything malicious. Like I think he always had the intentions of
He's
improving the
trying to
team.
improve the team
I
in his mind, right?
think he's trying to improve the team in his mind. And I don't have a problem with the coach running the roster, but I have a problem with things being definitive before running things up the ladder, so to speak. Like if
Essentially,
you
just to have approval to do
have
something.
have a conversation and discuss why or and a good example is I'll go all the way back to real quick to a situation where Guerra cut Thomas from the team because
Right.
he had I think it was might have been Kino or Kilo, I don't know, it was another player. He had somebody lined up to replace him, only to find out after he dropped Thomas that player wasn't going to play for Mirage. So then he had to go back to Thomas and pick him up as a player after you just dropped him. Like, what does that do to that player's confidence? So you can't run a team that way. You have to avoid situations like that. So by Yardy essentially cutting DP Fire without
Right.
necessarily having a discussion about it, what happens if we have a situation where we needed DP Fire to make the roster rules, and now you've cut that player? So there's certain administrative side to the running the team that the coach doesn't. I wouldn't say doesn't think about, but there's just so many different levels of what needs to happen and the way it should be handled.
So if you're so if the players, so I guess the question would be, so let's say it's a situation where the players decide they want to bench DP, and they tell Yardy this, right?
Okay.
Was this the situation here that you know of, or you don't know?
That is not the situation that I know of, and the reason that that's not the situation that I know of is because there's been talk about keeping DP Fire on the team. So, like, he's still on the team as a sub, and there's been talk about leaving him where he is, potentially shifting him around depending on roster rules and what we have to deal with. And if I feel like if the players wanted that to wanted that
Mm-hmm.
that would still be the case. Like, if DP Fire doesn't play next year for us, it's not going to be because we didn't want him. It's going to be because he didn't want to play. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So essentially, you're saying that you still want DP on the team, but if DP doesn't want to play, then that's his decision.
Correct. And that's been the conversations that I've had with individual players, with
Mm.
team meetings. That's been the consensus of the team. Now, if that stuff happened, you know, be if that stuff happened and there's DMs of them saying that they have a problem with this or a problem with
Right.
that, you know, like I can't say that that's true or not true, but um, I just I feel like Yardi did a very, very good job at surprising a lot of people, and I have nothing but positive things to say about him to a certain point. He surprised the hell out of me and what he did, because I would have never thought he was capable of doing the job that he did do. And what I mean, I'm just saying stuff that doesn't show up in matches, stuff that doesn't show up like in, you know, stuff that I just see him as a professional. He did really well. Surprised the hell out of me.
Mm-hmm.
I felt he just got to a position as a coach where he couldn't help the team anymore. And that was what I was
So
worried about as far as player development, as far as like he's just hit a place where he cannot improve the team for what the team needs to improve.
so um my question here might sound a little dickish, and that's not my intent,
Sure.
but I'm kind of just a dick. Um, so you just said about you thought Yardi surprised you did all this and all this, and then that he can't. You got to a point where you thought Yardi could not help the team improve anymore. Okay, my thought here is Yardi was only with the team for one stage.
Right.
Yardi also handpicked all of the players on the team, and he also dropped all of the players that were on the previous team who wanted him on the team in the first place.
Right.
So, from an outside point of view, and obviously you know way more than anybody else here, from an outside point of view, this looks like a shit show. Because he was only with the team for one stage, and all of a sudden he can't help the team improve anymore. And he's the reason that the team has all the players it has right now in the first place. Now, these players could go on and win the major. We don't know.
Right.
Obviously, stage 1 the team did not do good. But from my perspective, it's like saying two different things here, kind of, because we're like you already did a really good job of this and this, but he couldn't help the team grow anymore. But I mean, he only was with the team for one. It's not like I don't want to. I'll compare it to a Lycan situation.
Right.
Lycan's with the team for like 5 years, 6 years. At some point, things that you just got to move on, try some new energy, right? Yardi, whether he was doing a good job or a bad job, there's not a lot of opportunity there to really work with them, unless it was such a shit show. To be on to me, like, again, this is my point of view. Unless it was such a shit show that the players are like, we got to get like somebody else in here because this is just we're just like running our heads into a wall. Like, is what I'm saying to you make sense?
Absolutely. Absolutely makes sense. And there's a lot of things that I won't talk about only because I don't want to trash talk certain people or throw
Right.
other people under the bus. But
I understand. Yeah.
yeah, but there was problems. You know that there was problems because if immediately when he replaced all the other players from the previous roster, if you ask all those players now, Yardi was the problem, even though that's the coach that they wanted.
Mm-hmm.
So now all of a sudden, I mean, it's the same thing. Well, wait a second, because I remember having that conversation with them. Like, this is who you wanted, and now he's the problem. Like, explain that to me. Is he the problem because he replaced you, or is he the problem because, you know, or what? You know, what's the
So
deal
you
here?
think you like Yardi is like good natured and what he's trying to do. Like his intentions are good. He wants to build a good team. He wants to win. But his I guess in theory, his way of going about this just creates problems on the teams because like I don't think anybody would sit here and say Yardi's just trying to fucking sabotage Mirage.
Yeah, no,
Like
he's not.
Yardi wants to win, but the way he's going about it created issues for two completely different teams over the course of a few months. Is that like fair to say?
That is fair to say, and it's also fair to say that people questioned his judgment on certain calls to make sure that there wasn't friendship calls made versus this is what needs to be done, not because we're friends, but because it's the decision that's right for the team. Does that
So
make
they
sense?
thought Yardi was making some decisions based off of friendship rather than
I wouldn't say they thought that, but making
Mhm.
sure that that wasn't coming into play. I'm not saying that
Right.
that's what was done,
I understand.
but it goes back to the whole thing with me and Nick's, right? Making a decision for the team because it's the best team decision, or
Mm-hmm.
am I just trying to help my son out? Like
Mm-hmm.
it's the same. My situation's obviously 10 times worse because that's my son. I get that scrutiny, but the
Right,
same
yeah.
kind of concept to make sure that we're making decisions that's best for the team and not decisions because it saves jobs for certain people.
So like in theory, if another team like let's say Wildcard wanted to hire Drip as their coach and they came to you like with your thoughts, would you recommend Drip or would you be like honestly I probably would go a different direction? Like was this just like kind of in your opinion like a bit of a failed experiment or do you think that under the right circumstances it could have worked out differently?
Um, I want to give Yardi the benefit of the doubt, and that's why I'm trying not to fry anybody. But I didn't want
Just
him as
okay.
the I didn't want him as the coach to begin with. So
Right.
this essentially went the direction I thought it was going to go, and it's going to sound like a
Right.
dick. But it's going to sound like a dick move. But I literally told Carl, "This is the guy they want. I'm not going to be the team manager that says you're not getting this coach, and them going to come
Mm,
back and say we failed because we didn't get Yardi."
right.
So and when I say he surprised me, it's because he did more than I thought he was going to do. And he
He
is
was
good.
taking it seriously.
He is
Like,
taking it serious, and he does have a future if that's the path that he wants to go down.
right.
Like I can see him being a coach and working on. We're all human. Nobody's perfect. I'm not perfect. I've made
Well,
numerous
besides me, of course.
yeah, I've made numerous mistakes. I've made bad judgment calls. I've made horrible decisions. You know, and we just learn from them and we try to improve. I think
Mm.
he is very capable of doing that.
Just
And
not on Mirage.
just not on Mirage.
Okay. Um, we can move on kind of to where the team's at now. I just wanted to maybe speak a little bit more on that because I know that's like kind of the hot topic, and
Yeah.
I thought it was worth having
And
a
again,
discussion.
I have nothing but respect for Yardi, even though he's called me out on even on your stream numerous times about
Mm,
certain things. Like I have nothing but respect for him. It's just it's I I didn't think it was going to work out. This was the confirmation that it didn't work out,
right.
and I need to point the team in a different direction.
So with the current team, which is Kansan Rampy, Slothy, um, it seems like you kind of confirmed DP Fire sort of like he's up in the air. He might not want to play anymore, but if he did,
Right.
like you're certainly open to him playing.
Right.
I know you guys are playing in like these. I think you're doing the Game Rogue that I'm actually co-streaming right after this
Right.
with Vert and Spiker. Is that is this like a trial version of the team, or are they kind of just like playing right now just to be able to get like some practice in?
We're finalizing detail, all the behind the scenes type stuff to secure a
Mm,
roster for the next season within the rules, of course.
right,
We're limited to two moves, um, certain hurdles that we have to meet,
of course, yeah.
but um, but I can't say or say I can't say or deny which what the roster will look like when
Hmm.
everything's said and done. But
And are you guys like obviously you guys are in need of a coach? Are you trialing coaches, or is Justin, who's been with the Mirage as like an analyst for a while? Is he going to move into a coach position, or are you
Uh,
guys kind
no,
of trialing that?
we've been trialing coaches. We've been looking at other people that we potentially wanted to bring in
Hmm.
to that would fit what we were looking for as a coach.
So I guess at this point, I think we've pretty much touched on everything that I can think of. Um, I guess my question for you would be: is there anything that you and I have not discussed, or that you feel like we didn't discuss enough, that you would like to go back to before we call it?
Um, I mean, anybody that's ever dealt with me knows that I'm here for the players. Like I've said, I'm here for the players and the I
Mm,
care. I mean, a lot of these guys they're like extensions of my family. Like
right.
Mitch, and I still talk to him to this day. People that I've teamed with, and at the end of the day, when everything's said and done, it ultimately comes down to business, and I want to
Hmm.
win. It's never ever been about the money for me. It's been about
Right.
trying to build something and grow this community. Like I went through cancer. A lot of people don't know that. And this community pulled me through that.
Hmm.
Like, I went through cancer and a divorce at the same time. And if it wasn't for this game, I don't know if I would have come out the same person on the other side. So,
Right.
um, and I don't forget that. I don't forget the messages and I don't forget the love and I don't forget all of that. And I do care about this community and I do care about these players and I do care about the future of this game, and I'm just trying to do the best I can with with the scraps that I'm given. So, and as far as like when I'm like I do think Mirage is committed into trying to correct uh its mistakes. It's not
I
perfect.
Yeah, I guess I do have kind of one question tying into the end of that there. Um, let's say we go through the year and the issues with Mirage continue and people are late paid, not paid, money's owed, you yourself owed money. Will it or can it get to a point where you just say you can't, because again, some people are going to be ignorant and they're going to blame you, or they do blame you for the org not paying players. At the end of the day, it's not your money, right? You're not paying them.
Well, some of it's not. There's been I've sent players home. I've personally paid for things to get guys back to their house to send their stuff because they didn't have stuff when they showed up in Vegas. So it is my money. And if your question is at what point, I will never stop. I will always continue to push until things are made right in every way that I can.
Can it get to a point where, because I'm assuming Mirage owes you money for doing things like that, because that's
Absolutely.
usually org expense, can it get to a point where you like just cut ties with Mirage, or do you feel obligated to Mirage? And maybe this is something you can't answer, but to be honest, because they owe you money. Because
Uh,
at the end of the day, like if they owe you money, I'd want to stick around until I see my money. You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah. If Mirage never paid me another dime, but I got every other person paid back what they're owed,
mhm.
I would take that as a W.
But we still wouldn't bring back Yardy, and that would be a W for you and me.
So yeah, I mean, like I want to get the people paid.
Okay, well, um, again, I do want to reiterate. I know the Mirage payment situation is certainly a topic that many have discussed, and I've been critical of it myself. But I do want to say to anybody listening, anybody watching, DNA is not responsible for that. He's owed money just like everyone else. So you can send whatever trash talk, whatever you want at the org, but at the end of the day, the decisions DNA is making, whether you agree with the drop or release of some of these players over the years, it's not impacted by that. It's just what DNA thinks is best, going to give the team the best chance to win. And the things that are outside of his control, I mean, he can't really do anything about it other than hope that it's taken care of. At least that's how I've interpreted our conversation about it.
Yeah.
Um, So for me, this is the end of the if Supr says it. I hope you guys enjoyed it. DNA, if there's anything you'd like to say, if there's anything you'd like to, we can keep going if you want to. If there's
No,
anything
no,
you'd like to
we're
talk about
no,
before,
we're good. Just
I'm
I
ready to
appreciate
close it out.
you having me on, and for the people that are listening, thanks for listening. And if anybody's got something they want to talk, we can have a conversation. I'm always approachable to anybody in the community. So, I love everybody, and that's pretty much all I got to say. Most people that know me know that I try to be a nice guy. There's very few people that I dislike or that don't like me, I hope. And if you don't, I'm sorry that you do.
Yep. So for me, this is the end of If Supr Says It today. I will, however, be staying live to go to Game Rogue. This is live. This is not pre-recorded like a lot of the other episodes. For those of you interested in watching this back, it's in the VODs or it'll be uploaded to YouTube later. I want to thank DNA for joining me today to discuss Mirage, discuss his career in Siege and the future of Mirage and his future in Siege. And I hope you guys enjoyed it. Thanks for hanging out. Thanks for watching.